It is.
So it's not checked, so it's.
Okay. I'll try to pull it up here and not do the alien.
And Rebecca's coming, she's just gonna be late, she's coming from Stadium. Yeah,
She's in the call on Zoom.
Where's the-
For the time being.
Yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, did she say she was?
Sandy and Pam.
Oh, there is.
Bye.
12:30 here works.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
Didn't,
Coming the other
it
way.
didn't
but
involve a
traffic
white
is-
Toyota truck or anything, did it?
It's like a Mercedes. and
Okay.
something else. I was trying.
I just say that because, you know, my husband comes home that way too. So.
Oh, yeah, yeah, it's. Oh,
Did it come up?
Did yours disappear?
Uh-oh.
it came up and then it disappeared.
Yeah.
Oh, there.
You just said it,
I
I just-
I maybe just. didn't-
There you go.
Yeah. Sit here, Bill.
Will you turn on the camera for just a sec? We had some feedback about our angle.
Was it on floors?
Pretty much.
Just from your
It
computer.
was just like.
Just turn your camera.
It was on my back the whole
Oh,
time.
like here,
It was a little awkward.
it's me, see,
Oh.
that's no good. So
Jason,
then, let's see, we have this issue, yeah, so. Is it HD camera? Let's try it.
Hey,
Mhm.
you gotta turn off blur my background.
It's right there.
Oh,
Yeah, that's.
If I have it, it'd be better.
does it slide down the TV?
Here's that clip right. Well, you guys have seen me like not before.
Yeah. It's a good start, maybe.
It's not.
This is up. But can they hear or? Pull up to.
Think we're good to go.
I think we could probably start.
Yes.
Well, thought we could share our proposed agenda for the evening, just to give people a sense of what we're thinking. And so we were thinking, we'd start by just kind of checking in about the coast state, just talk about that. And then we wanted to hear if management had any counter proposals that they wanted to share first after that. And then we're ready to share counter proposals on 7, 8, and 11. They're all pretty short compared to last time, so they should be pretty brief. And then we thought after that, we could maybe do a brief caucus, review stuff, and then come back and have a bit more discussion about Article 6, just to kind of talk a little more at the table about some of the other like non-economic areas, and then also some follow-up about the economic stuff as well. Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
We want to look back to May 29th.
And talk about the 29th, okay. Sure. We could, do we want to maybe hash that at the end, or,
Or we could just do part of the logistics. at the
I guess,
beginning.
yeah, we could just do that at the
Yeah.
beginning, sure. Well, in that case, we can just talk about the 29th then. What are people's thoughts on that?
So do you want to talk about coast first?
Sure, yeah, I mean, so we have, Pearl has that date set on Friday, but we also wanted to like acknowledge that. Obviously, that's a date change from what we had, and we recognize like not everyone can make it and things like that, so if that means. Like people attend virtually, like we're okay if things are not like being TA'd that night, if that just means we're presenting and caucusing, like that's okay. Or if people can't make it at all, like we'll still use that time to talk to members, so we just wanted to share that with you all.
So we confirmed that Rocco and Tim can come over and attend in person. We do want to just confirm that we'll be able to stream to the YouTube channel from there. So that's pretty like essential for us.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll send an email I'll do that tonight or tomorrow to the person that's coordinating it. She already made it sound like it's
Yeah,
possible.
She said it's pretty set up for that kind of stuff. Her concern was just that we bring our own equipment. They do have like HDMI cables and things like that, but I was like, I'm sure we can bring our own equipment. We'd have to rent the equipment if we needed them to provide it, but it seemed like it was pretty set up for this kind of stuff, so.
Do you have questions, follow-up questions about that?
No, mainly I just need make sure I have internet access and
Okay.
things like that.
Yeah, I'll shoot an email tomorrow and just make sure, hey, is internet all set up? Can both teams bring are you gonna bring the owl?
Yeah.
Yeah, so can they just stream YouTube? Okay, sure.
Neither of our board members will be able to attend, so that we are just confirming that there won't be any TAs. Nancy will not be joining virtually. I'm uncertain whether I'll be able to. or not.
Okay. Sounds good.
So it might truly be the Tim and Marco show.
That's okay. It'll be great.
And then we also we'd love to know what the agenda is. For like what we're gonna cover on that session, so that if there's things that maybe Nancy and I typically would cover, that we have time with Tim and Rocco to make sure. So what I would say is, we have 2 weeks until then, so if by the end of next week, we would know what the agenda would be, that would help us prep. So that whatever we need to cover is prepared.
Sure thing.
Anything else?
If I do show up online, I will be driving, so I'll be listening and not.
Since 2020, I think nobody will bat an eye. Let's just go.
Ask Rebecca for tips. Well versed in zooming while driving.
That's
Very good
true.
at it.
She is. I will also be joining by Zoom, but I hopefully won't be driving.
Sweet. Is there anything else we had about the coast? Okay, anything else from? Okay. Did you have any counters that?
Well,
the
so I
29th.
May
JK,
29th.
sorry.
So there was a question about sub-cost coverage, so for morning sub. We're asking that, because the association has funds for that, that's part of. What you guys can use those funds for, that you would cover the cost for that, so we would just, work with our business office on that, for Jules. Since long-term care and treatment kind of has a built-in staff sub, we can use that without any cost to the association, so it would just be the one sub.
Do we know how much that would be?
We can find out. Yeah,
That'd be helpful.
yes.
I may just not have caught it last time. Were we proposing on doing this just during the workday?
Yes, well, yeah, I think so.
Okay,
I don't think we want to go into the,
yeah.
we'd also proposed a 10 o'clock start. If that way, if we wanted to caucus ahead of time, like, it would give space for people to be able to do that. And then we can just end by 4 or 5, depends on where we're at with stuff.
So did I miss, like, those of us that will be in district that day, then like, we just don't come, or?
Yeah, would you want us to just email our districts if we're assigned to a district that day?
I think we would need to work with your directors on that. I mean,
We could probably have conversations.
we can also let, if your district has a question about it, like, we can back that up of why we're asking for that.
Okay,
Um,
and I think that would just be you, right?
No, I'm in.
Sarah.
You're also in district. Okay. Yeah,
So,
we,
like, talk to our supervisor.
yeah, and then we'll look back, we kind of know which programs you guys are in, and we'll look back with the supervisors as well to know that you're asking for a good reason, so. And then if we need to move back to your districts at all, we can do that as well.
yeah, once we hear from supervisors, that should be fine. Just writing that we're good for that on the 29th. Now do you have any counter proposals that you all wanted to share?
Well, I brought 11 again with the small edit that I had put in the email. I don't know if that's what your edit
We
was.
have the same thing.
Okay, so I don't, if it truly was that edit, like, we could look at the two together and just make sure we edited the right way.
Correct.
Yeah, we added your text from the email.
Okay, then I think we're, yeah, let's double check just to make sure.
Yeah, your text from the email, and then we put back in the statement about waiving the right to initiate a demand department.
So I'll let you guys double check there.
You want one
You want
for
more
everyone?
copy to that?
I have lots if you want one.
I think we'll just, we're gonna double
It's
check
really
it first
early.
and then we can do a quick TA on that. I need glasses. So. Did you found more grammar than I did? So.
Okay, and the change in the last sentence, where you're removing evaluation program for licensed employees.
Yeah, that's what it's actually called.
Okay, that's what I figured. It was-
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like maybe we'll TA both because you had a couple grammar. And then I'll just staple them together so that because what I've been doing every time we TA is I've gone into a big document and made the changes. So that we have a running big document of all the TA items. But I see you had two small grammar things on here and I don't have those on mine, unless you could add them. Handwritten.
That's probably better.
That
Did they
Just-
match?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then do we wanna TA that one, cause it also had the change of the name? If you wanna add it, so you added, implementation of a sound supervision. And then capital T. The association agrees on the paragraph with 8.
Changed it.
Even image. So,
Oh, just next to it. Okay.
yeah, just so that-
Yeah, just next to it.
Christine, did you have any other ones?
Yep, we've got 13.
Okay,
Let's see, pass that one out. So we'll let the copies get down. And it may just be, I may need to ask some clarification, because when I read this in B, I feel like what you added in C is also already up in B. So that's why we went back and crossed out what you added in C, because I felt like it was covered under B.
Just placed. Yeah. that would be central.
If you want, you could take it to caucus and look at it a little bit more. It may be that there's some language that was in that second one that could be added into the, so we're not.
That's
Maybe
what we're
just really
thinking,
quick,
there's
yeah.
a slight difference, but it might be.
So that's kind of where I was like, I didn't want it to just be repetitive, so if we can be more efficient with our language and bring them together, that'd be great.
Sweet. And that was the main change for that one, just that
Yep.
one part.
That's it.
Okay,
And then we did bring a version of Article 6.
oh, okay.
So, I mean, it's, because what, do we want to hold that, do 7 and 8? And then maybe come back and do some potential, or do you want to dive into 6?
Yeah,
I don't know what you.
I think we'd be open to looking at,
Okay.
6.
Okay.
It may be that there's, pieces of it that will answer questions that we have.
So again, what we did this time is if something's not highlighted anymore, it means that we are good with the language or whatever change was made from the original one. So we've, agreed to those pieces. Under B3, just some slight changes, because it's not necessarily gonna be an opportunity for a training, so I just use the term equivalent experience. And then it kind of clarified like, how many hours that might be, and then because we know it can't necessarily always happen, or it might not even make sense for it to all happen in like 1 or 2 days, like not necessarily gonna do 2 days in a row at the very beginning. It might need to be more spread out, depending on when someone's hired, so that they can get out into their district. So still the same amount of time, just varied a little bit different for an employee that comes on later. So that was a little bit of those changes. Small grammar, under C, just change that a little bit to be more around consultation and collaboration. To try and clarify that a little bit more of what that process looks like. Under D, so this has been a weird one, and I used to be the program director for this. Because if you read the very first statement, it says no employee will be required to work during the month of July with these exceptions, and the statement about family support liaisons has actually never made sense to me. And it's actually caused a lot, like that August 15th date has made for their calendars to end up being really weird sometimes, because of not being able to start till like the 17th, and then we're stuck with them like starting on a Friday and then starting on Monday. So I was like, they actually fit into the rest of these like kind of exceptions, that if they are gonna work during their, they're gonna work with their supervisor to get an extra duty contract. So I just wanted to like say, from experience of actually supervising these employees, this has caused a lot of grief over their calendars every year. So that was why we went ahead and struck that one.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? You said that their calendars are now more similar to. And then you mentioned these other kinds of employees. You're talking about the ones that are listed as exceptions?
No, they
Regular
fit into a
employees that
regular,
don't-
yeah,
okay,
they're
thank you.
210s. So
Okay.
they go through the end of June and then usually start mid-August, and has sometimes been on the fifteenth. But when the calendar is just a weird year, it's caused a lot of issues. Like this most recent year, I think they started on a Friday and their last day is gonna be a Monday.
Well, and also they had to work on a Friday that you guys have off.
Yeah.
That first.
In order to
First
fit
week
the
back, the
210 day count, like it's
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
it created, it boxed us into a situation and. Any FSL that has wanted to work during the summer and has worked that out with their district, we've always done an extra contract for, so. F, we were cool with that, we just wanted to have the consideration that, if it's someone serving students directly in a district and a 2-week spring break would cause an impact on that direct service, that would be considered in defining that calendar, so.
So would they get 2 weeks, just not necessarily consecutive? Or they just would get
Potentially,
2
or
weeks?
they might use those extra 5 days someplace else. It would kind of.
Okay, so they're not losing the days,
No,
it's just.
no, they're just gonna-
Schedule it some other time.
Schedule
Okay, a lot of the
Yep.
AI people do that anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
The one true 220 person that we know of. I don't think it's ever been a problem for them to have the 2-week spring break. So. And then, so coming to D and E, I'm gonna let Rocco kind of talk. So we've done some work with this, so that's why it's reverted back. Because, when we get into 16 and going deeper into 16, there was already some information in 16 about mileage and stipends and some things like that, and so.
Yeah, it's more of a compensation issue, so we feel it belongs in 16, not that we're taking it out or not considering it on there. We have a proposal for you to address the concerns that you're looking at. We'll grab that as we get to 16.
But it will, some of what was in here will show up. in that. Kind of like when you took some things out of this and put it into another section, you're like, this actually makes sense to put over there. Adjusted schedule. Just made some changes there, around how that works with the supervisor. So reverted back to some things, but kept some other things in it. Closures, pretty much, agreed with quite a bit of the changes there. We did, just for clarity's sake, because, sometimes, under the section 2 there, it's not just about like not being able to report for the whole day, but sometimes it's a late start early, like wanted to cover all the bases of what can happen. So not working the whole day, late start, or early release, because all 3 of those can happen. And then took out teaching because we have all kinds of different staff, not just teaching staff. And then agreed to 3, 4, again. For the most part, agreement, some slight changes for clarity in that as well. And you'll see that basically we actually reverted back completely. J, K, L, M, and N, those all had financial implications, and so that's probably where we could have more like a discussion about some of that, if you have questions. Follow up from last time. That was our way of kind of like restarting that and just saying we can have some open dialogue about it.
And the personal expression section, does that also have financial?
So that's a legal thing. Basically, our legal counsel has said that we don't manage people's lives outside of work. And so we wouldn't want to put something in there that would imply that we now are gonna manage what you do or don't do outside of work. So they just encourage that it's not something that is our job to do, like outside of work time is your time. So we wouldn't want to put something in there that suddenly makes what you do outside of work part of our responsibility to supervise.
So we will have some questions, that we want to share and we'll. I'm not certain if we want to do that now, it'll take some caucus time. But I do want to say before we, make that decision, that our team does appreciate having, a physical, proposal. We think that's important and useful. And there have been a couple times, like with talking about financials and that sort of thing, where it's difficult to tell what is a proposal and what is the conversation. And what is useful about this is that this is information we can process. We can see what is crossed off, but we can see what is still open. Which I think is important from a collaboration perspective and just, direct communication. So we really appreciate that. With regards to the working conditions.
And what I'll say is like, we mentioned already that we have something in 16 around the mileage, like, but for us, we really do need to clear out 6 in order to feel comfortable to move forward with what we've got in 16 and be able to start to have that back and forth around 16, 17 and 18. Because there was such a big financial impact in this that would then impact what we can and cannot offer out of 16, 17 and 18. So we really are wanting to try to maybe get this cleared out. And if that's not gonna be, like, if there's some reasons why you're like, well, we can't do this, and just like we're saying, we need this to be able to do this. If you have some reasons for why we want to hang on to this because of this, then let's have that conversation. So.
I don't know what people think about this. It might be useful to take it to our caucus time, because we already had some questions that we were gonna ask, and you answered a lot of those questions, and so that would
Okay.
help us to like
Yeah.
organize our.
Organize what you
with
want
that.
to ask them.
Yeah,
Do you have 7 and 8 that you?
yeah,
back
we
to
do.
us? Because then if there's something, that would give us something to review.
Yeah, let's do that.
Sorry, I don't read there.
Morning will go over 7 and I'll go over 8.
Actually, I think I'm responding to, yeah, that's fine. Okay, so we only had a couple of small things. One, we rewrote the language, but I just want to clarify and make sure that we understood it correctly. So you had written that, sick leave hours are front loaded on the first contract day of each year and accumulate without limit. That made sense. In the case of new employees, sick leave is granted on a prorated basis, but they also receive the whole amount that's prorated at the beginning. Okay, so we just changed the language slightly to say that sick leave shall be granted on a prorated basis according to projected time instead of actual time that will be worked in the current fiscal year, because it seemed like saying actual time is you're gonna be looking at how many hours they actually worked, whereas you're really awarding it to them based on their projected work time. And then the only other thing that we added was illness or injury of the employee. So that's in number 4 of a family member as defined in OFLA, FMLA, or paid leave Oregon, just because that's part of the consideration. And I think that was it. Oh, and then the other thing that we did is under D. I'm trying to use this. we did some slight formatting. Because it was, the title is bereavement leave,
Yep.
but there were kind of like three different. Situations of bereavement leave, and so we just turned it into a numbers 1, 2, and 3. Just to make it slightly more clear. All of the other recommended changes that you guys made, the. Accepted those, so. Just some minor changes there.
Eight, paid leave. Yeah, same thing, except for the addition of paid leave Oregon and the title change to human resources. And same thing, accepted the cross out of the criteria list and then just added a statement at the end. That says applications shall not be unreasonably denied. And then I think everything else stayed pretty much the same.
Mhm.
And we already talked about 11, that was the other one we were gonna share about, so.
So how much caucus do we want to, because I think for these, it'll be a pretty quick review.
Did we talk about 30 minutes just to?
Yeah.
30 might be good.
Yeah.
And Rebecca's on her way, so hopefully she's here.
So 6:30,
Yeah.
sounds good. Oh, number 1,
We are still working on that one.
And I believe we have some
ten and 12 are legal teams looking at,
Okay,
and then 15 is a long one. And I need to work with, my team is out on a conference this week, so I need to work with them just to like make sure.
Oh, right, that's the,
That's the
this, and
Yes,
this,
yes,
yeah, the
yes.
4 sections.
So those.
Hiring,
you'll see.
transferring, firing, and.
Yes, all of that. employee, you get the full amount. So that's why this is crossed off. Because it doesn't apply. So if you're a half-time person, you get the three, what is it, three?
3 hours.
3 hours. If you're a full-time, you get the 3 hours. Because there's no way in the system to prorate it.
Would it be possible then to just take out the word full time listed above? In the first sentence,
Yeah,
yeah,
Yep.
Totally.
because then that would make it more.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or
That does-
even replace it with any,
it
is
just,
it any employee?
You do employees.
yeah, employees encompasses everybody, so.
We can
mm,
take care of that now.
Yes,
And then, if we want to back up to. The part, leave shall not be used to extend a vacation or holiday period unless permission is granted by the employee's program director. Our team kind of recognized there's a bit of like redundancy, because. Then further down there, 6 on this is the employee shall not be required to provide the specific reasons for the requested leave. So I think while we recognize like the trouble that it could create, if that is genuinely the reason for someone taking leave, like intending to extend a holiday vacation. There's also like a feasibility piece of it too, where it's like we don't necessarily know the reason why a person needs that leave. And perhaps there is a reason that is, well, I guess it doesn't, if there is no reason to be asking in the contract, then there is no obligation to provide a legitimate reason, if that makes sense.
it's not about the reason, it's about the number of people. It's being able to say, I have 8 staff that all, are all requesting to be out the day before a holiday, and it means I'm gonna have to shut classrooms down.
Yeah.
So they're still not asking what it's about, it's just the ability to say, hey, team, we can't do this, so how are we gonna work around this? I mean, I don't know, maybe there are situations with programs where directors do say no, I don't know. I mean, I was a director that was pretty like, okay, go for it, as long as it didn't impact what they were doing in their district, so.
And I know that at least one other director was the same way. It's just looking at how will it impact what's going on in your district? No, okay.
I think it becomes much more of an issue at EIE, CSE or long-term care treatment.
Yeah.
Right, where you really could get that entire facility shuts down.
I appreciate that feedback, and I wonder if there is a way to work that into language to provide that kind of clarity. I think that's something that members would respond to, that recognition that it's not necessarily about policing what leave is for. It's recognizing that if there is a significant enough impact on a program, maybe there is need for some creativity and some collaboration with a program director.
We talked about that a little bit. No, it was, keep taking the note,
Oh, but I deleted it because
okay,
we changed it. I wrote. But
yeah. We'd have to go back and kind of look at how to, and I mean, you're welcome to also like kind of look, we talked about we use the term substantial impact on the continuity of the service. But when we started messing with that, then we had trouble because then you would go down to the next ones where like it is at the discretion of the employee. And so
Yeah.
like we're getting ourselves into a loop with it.
You'd have to go through and rewrite any of the bullet points on there to get the whole thing to work.
And we didn't want it to get to the point where you requested a personal day off and we said, oh, sorry. 2 people called in sick, you can no longer have your personal time. And that's where the language kept leading when we went down that road.
Yeah, like we literally got stuck almost in an infinite loop on this one of like, we were trying to make it so it would work, and then we just kind of kept coming back of like, no, it's just actually better the way it currently is. So. But you can play with the loop
Yeah.
if you want to.
You can come up with,
Yeah.
give it a go.
Yeah.
Questions? So we have some follow-up questions to the discussion that we had last time on Article 6, the working conditions. We recognize that you might not be able to answer all of the questions now because there's probably going to need to be some checking in with particular programs. We heard the concerns that you were expressing about the financial impact that the request we made would cost. We would like to have a conversation about some of the concerns that have been expressed by our members and why, not necessarily why, but just that led to some of the things that we were asking about. And maybe there's some other creative way that we can all come to a solution about those. Pearl had a question or a suggestion, I guess, about the personal expression portion, or just something that we wanted to ask about.
Yeah, so, we totally understand like the legal concerns. So our membership has kind of told us that they would like some reassurance kind of spelled out in writing, in the contract. And pretty much like what you were saying, Christy, is like, that's kind of what we're just asking for, is just some kind of in writing reassurance, like what you were saying before. So, like, if we could put something in there like that. It'd be-
Like, we're not in the market of checking up on y'all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Your personal life is separate from your work life.
there is one final piece on there as well, though, to consider. We understand this in terms of what you're thinking about being able to go out and do your advocacy. There is a second piece on there where we could have somebody go out there and do something that is so egregious and so against the values of taking care of children. We would all want us to take action, and we don't want to box ourselves into a space where if somebody actually did that, we'd say, well, we can't really address it.
Right, because if you're gonna offer that protection,
And it goes across the board on there, so if
It goes
somebody wants
the other
to,
way.
they want to start spouting off really horrible racist things or things against children on there, we gotta say it's in the CBA.
So that is the backside of that. When you do a blanket statement, it can go for all behavior.
So maybe not what you were saying, but something similar, but with some caveat for preserving the right, if it reaches a level of whatever.
But then we have a subjective, what is the platform?
Yeah,
Well, I'm glad he's, right, like, I think he spelled it out, that's pretty good.
But I mean, again, I mean, it's a slippery slope because then someone comes right up to the edge of that. Is that like, and it's still somebody's interpretation of, is that egregious or not? And this is again why the legal counsel literally said, like, we're not in the business of even like putting this in writing somewhere.
And the problem with lists, when as soon as you start spelling it out, anything you don't include is free game. You know, if it's not specifically called out.
Again, we completely understand.
I acknowledge the intent. I mean,
Yes.
it's very similar to, I feel like we had something similar when we talked about the non-discrimination clause. Or the article, I think it was in the Article 4, there was a section in there about. The advocacy that you were doing on work time. And we were comfortable with that because it clarified that it was about your work time. And again. I've been to a lot of sessions about personal expression and employees and just repeatedly, it's like, this is not something that you want to add into a CBA because again, it's a lot of interpretation, a lot of, you start making lists and you're not gonna be able. You think you've got it all covered and then the thing pops up and it's like, oh my gosh, someone did this. So.
Clarifications. Okay, we have a couple questions and then some information to provide related to caseload. and then also related to incidents. Okay, so one of the questions that we have is, there was some discussion about how we had determined the definition of caseload when we were looking at caseload limits. And we realized that when we were looking at those, we were actually looking at the information that you guys provided us through in the RFI, where it lists different supervisors listed the information in different ways, but caseload is listed, and so that was the information that we were using. So we didn't define it on our own because it seemed like it had already been defined. So I guess our general question would be, is there a definition of caseload that was used to collect that information? Or was it just arbitrarily decided on by each supervisor? And again, we understand if you can't answer that question today, but that was just,
So as an example, Autumn did both
okay.
student contact
Mhm.
and who actually is in charge of that student's
So service coordinator.
right? So she did both,
Mhm.
and again, I believe Steve did the same, you know, none of the strategic partner people have specific, well, no, Sharon probably does. It's just, they're all different, right? Family support liaisons are very different than behavior consultants, right? So there's different ways that the administrators have to look at
Right.
each group, and so there is not a generic LBL caseload definition, because all of the programs are.
And that was definitely information that we were using when we were looking at suggested caseload maximum. So I guess in that way, it makes sense that it would be considered by program, because in each program caseload is determined differently.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any other questions about that particular question?
I think the other piece to caseload too is also considering I guess severity is kind of the wrong word for it, but so I'll use family support liaisons as an example, in that some of them have a much higher quote unquote caseload, but the amount of intervention or work that they're doing is at a lower level, so they can manage more, versus there's another FSL where her district uses her a little bit differently, and she does much more high-level intervention, so her caseload is actually much smaller, but much more intensive.
Which is difficult because they're weighting caseloads is extremely difficult to do.
Yeah.
And so we didn't even go down that particular road. And okay, so that was one of the questions. And then another question that we were wondering, is there a state or federally mandated minimum number of days or hours that an ECSU student has to attend school? Like there is with elementary students, there's a certain number of days or hours that they have to attend school. I know that there are recommended numbers of days and hours for particular disabilities, but that's our question.
And I think there's a recommended number of days as well, and I know that,
Well, and I'm not sure that there would be, because it's not compulsory. It's,
yeah.
yeah,
But I also would want to make sure, so there might be what is state or federal, but then there is also meeting the requirements of the contract itself.
Yeah.
Right, and so
Okay.
can't answer your question right now.
Right, I understand. So that's one of the
Yeah.
questions that we would like to have the answer to. Okay, and then, so those were the two questions, and then we just have some information to provide, just to share the information that our members have been providing us with, that we're raising concerns related to working conditions and the kinds of things that we're trying to address. And we're just hoping that we can all come up with some creative solutions or ways to address these concerns. So one of the concerns that was mentioned, and I heard what Autumn had to say and what you guys had to say about if you have to add staff to classrooms when it's above 9 or above members, that there is a huge increase in cost. And I don't have specific data on this one. I'd have to go through and talk to providers. But I just know, at least within the people that I interact with on a regular basis, that when you get to the class size of 7 or 8, that is right when stress for all, like the teacher and the assistant, starts to go through the roof. And part of that is because there's a big increase in safety concerns. There's more running, biting, hitting, fighting, climbing onto high objects, you know, whatever, because it becomes much more difficult. And because of that, that's increasing the stress. And then, you know, people are worried about like their jobs, their license, what if something bad happens? So that obviously is increasing the stress. And then the other thing that happens that's really frustrating for everyone, because they want to be, you know, the best teachers they can be, is the quality of instruction really starts to go down. And that there's even direction to just simplify things and make everything easier. And then they start to feel like, you know, a babysitter and not a teacher. And so there's just real concerns, and that seems to be maybe not for every single teacher, but generally across the board, somewhere in that number of 7, 8, 9 is where that happens. And so that's just information to share, and we're just you know, members are just like, what can we do about this? How can we address this? How can we make it possible for people to not be in this state of stress from, you know, especially April and May and part of June. Everybody's just hoping that they can get to the end of the year without somebody getting seriously hurt, whether that's a staff member or a child, or both. And then the other information that I did collect, and this is not every ECSE specialist, because I just kind of did it really quickly, and one SLP is we had a progress report day on April 24th. And on a progress report day, you don't necessarily do progress on every single student, but a certain percentage of your caseload. And theoretically, you're supposed to be able to write a progress report for every child in your caseload on that day. The percentages that people were able to complete, and these were different people, the highest was 69%. And then there's a 40%, 48%, 27%, 30%, 22%. There is a 20%. That person said they can usually get 50 completed, but they had staff out. They had to complete classroom modifications to meet some OT recommendations, and they had a health protocol meeting. And that often happens because it is a day where you have no class, emergency things get scheduled in there. And so this is pretty typical in terms of how many progress reports you can get done in a day. And so then you're trying to play catch up for the next 2 or 3 weeks. And so the main suggestion that's been made by members is, what if we just had 2 days for progress reports? We have progress reports 3 times a year. What if it was just 2 days instead of 1? You know, could something like that work? So that was the information that I have to share. I have one copy of this if you guys would like it. It's just the it's not a super formal thing. It's just a list of the numbers and the percentages that they were able to complete. That's the information that I have to share. That's some information to share related to it as well.
And just real quickly, we did a couple more surveys of our members. So the first one was about that caseload, workload issue that we're talking about. And we had responses that were reporting that they're doing regularly extra time on their own time to finish reports and things like that. And we also specifically asked if anything was being done to kind of deal with that internally, like are there ways to come around it? Some members mentioned that flex time is sometimes offered, but often it doesn't even, the hours just keep racking up and then people aren't able to take them in the time frame they're supposed to take them. So you end up with, banked flex time that's never gonna get used. That's just extra time. The employees costs from these caseloads that they're managing. And then the other one refers back to the proposal we had about kind of adverse incidents, I'll call them those. So if something happens at work, making sure that employees are able to take the time to deal with that issue. We wanted some information about where those things are happening, because we have talked about they're more likely to happen in EI, ECSE and long-term care, but we did get responses from both Chris and C's that reported a variety of incidents that were either like physical and resulting in injury or even like sexual assaults that had happened in those departments. So members just wanted to kind of be out there that these are things that happen to everybody at every site, even if the incidence is lower, and that consideration over thinking of how we can prepare them when they're dealing with something like this that happens at work.
Can I follow? I think even just, I mean, as an SLP that's in the schools, like I'm in a life skills class this year and wow, and I don't even necessarily get the brunt of it because I'm in there for a much shorter amount of time, but I think I've talked to different ESD members that are in that classroom and there's just kind of an anxiousness that people experience when they're going in and they don't feel that there's a course that goes on, when you get punched in the eye or you get bit in the arm or, and obviously there's many factors around that aren't due to just, work. There's many things that contribute to that. And so like, I think people are, they're just looking for some ideas or assurances that there is, whether that's a caseload cap or there's some process or something like that. People are just kind of looking for, I think, for some assurance because of the volatile nature of the schools. And I hate to say that to sound negative, but I mean, the schools are kind of volatile right now and just the conditions that people are working in are challenging. So that's kind of where all this is coming from.
And I think we're providing this in hopes we can agree to
Right.
some way that we can show everyone that we're aware and we're thinking about it, trying to figure out a way to find a form.
And some of the strategies that have been implemented by school districts, because this has been a concern around the state, are obviously not going to work for us. We're not going to expel our students. We're not going to suspend our students. We're not going to send them to the principal. We're not going to put them in some other placement somewhere. So the strategies or the provisions that have been made for employees in elementary schools obviously aren't going to be effective. And so that's why we're trying to we're just trying to think of solutions. And so we would appreciate any ideas that you guys have as well. So in that vein, we would like to talk about the possibility, and Rebecca is going to, about the idea of packaging several of our articles together. We've heard that you have concerns about talking about salary and insurance without having completed the working conditions. And by packaging working conditions, salary, and insurance together, that means that they cannot be TA'd individually. They can be, they're a package, they're presented as a package, discussed as a package, and one does not exist without the other anymore. And we would like to propose combining working conditions, salary, and insurance together into one package.
So we are presenting a package proposal. I'm sending it right now. So. Is there a way to display it as well?
Sure. You can just send an email. I can-
Yeah, if you wanna go ahead and click on it and then put it up here.
I'm gonna go like up there first and then come back. down.
Yeah.
Doesn't just jump across the. You want me to just talk about the change that we made in that one
I think
number?
I can turn it to 2 minutes, but I think I'll walk through them.
Okay, that sounds good, yeah.
I'll just wait for it to pop up here. So I'm gonna read through this and then I'm gonna zoom out and walk through it a little bit in terms of next steps. So what we're presenting to you is a package proposal that we as the association are offering to you as the employer. This would then need to be countered or accepted as a package. Should the package be accepted, either party, or not be accepted, either party may revert to previous bargaining positions. A tentative agreement to this package shall represent a total agreement of parties for all the language proposed for the articles below, which is going to be the articles on working conditions, salary, and insurance. It's an economic package proposal. What this allows both of us to do are a couple of things. Number one, it allows us to look at the price tag of any economic proposals in its entirety. Because just like you're signaling to us, maybe you can't TA on something that has a price tag without considering what the other proposals are gonna cost, we also cannot really do that. The second thing it does is it gives us some flexibility. So these being proposals, and you're gonna see in this is really, since we're not gonna counter ourselves, since we haven't received a formal wage or health insurance article, you're not gonna see a difference in what we're proposing there. We made a small change, which Maureen will talk about in a minute, on working conditions. But this is to get the ball rolling. So, and again, some of you may be quite familiar with this concept or have done this before negotiations, but to not make assumptions, and for those watching as well, the next steps would essentially be if you counter back within this package, and we don't agree or we counter, you are free to go back to previous positions or make pretty radical changes that otherwise would be seen as regressive bargaining if they were single articles. So if you're saying we're offering, you know, this COLA, but here we're offering this on mileage, and that's not accepted, and you wanted to reverse that or alter it drastically, you would have the flexibility to do that, as would we, with the idea being that bargaining in good faith would constitute that the total price of the package is not moving backwards on either end. As in, if we're asking for an 8% COLA, we don't turn around and ask for like a 20%. Without making up the difference in another part of the package. It doesn't require either side to make changes in all 3 articles every time you're countering, but that's the general idea. And it is our intent to package our economic proposals from this point forward. Any questions on the packaging? Or I turn it back over to Maureen.
Because we didn't fully, we countered a portion of Article 6. To say it that way, I'm sorry, I forgot to pull it up, but in the first section where you talked about the 24, oh, thank you, go down a little bit further. Right there. So, with the new employee, language around, the equivalent experience of, 16 hours versus 2 days. We, thought that that language looked good. The only thing that we changed would be within 30 days. Just knowing that a lot of employees who come in the middle of the year or after orientation really often express later that they experienced a great deal of confusion and kind of frustration, made a lot of mistakes with things like mileage and timesheets and, you know, even just like little things, and didn't understand the requirements of their position. And it feels like 2 months is a little bit long, given the feedback that we've gotten from members around that topic. And so that's the change that we made in that article at this point in time.
We would need to caucus to discuss this.
Sure.
To discuss the change or discuss the,
We agreeing to the packaging.
And, you know, if you wanna move forward with single tentative agreements instead of packaging, I think it's just important for us to note that we're not going to be able to counter on single economic TAs without seeing the full scope of all of your economic counters, if that makes sense. So this helps us move forward.
I'll do that before we.
Sure. We have taken a look at the counter proposal for Article 8. And we want to preserve part of that sentence that was taken out. There is part of it that is redundant and repetitive of what comes before, but there is also a part of it that we do think is important and we think belongs in section B. And that is the portion of the language that includes, and any complaint that is not processed in accordance with the above steps shall be placed in or become a part of the employee's personnel file. And then it hooks in with the rest of that sentence.
Is that 13?
It's just-
13, yeah.
Yeah.
Not 8, it's 13.
Yeah.
The complaint that is not.
Yeah, gotcha, yeah. So we have a handwritten
Okay.
change to it that you could take to caucus.
Yeah.
Sure. And towards the end, do we wanna, I don't know, kind of go over our plan for the 16th and then
I feel
I
like
guess there's more we need to talk about.
I'm
or-
worried about, like, if we don't come to some sort of agreement about the package, it's gonna slow us way down.
Yeah, and I just kind of want to step back, because I know we kind of checked that as an idea. We're going to continue to package our economic proposals. If you choose to respond with single TAs, we're still going to be responding with a package. So we don't really have to like come to an agreement whether we package or not, like that's how we're going to be presenting our economic proposals. If you want to respond with 3 singles, or we're doing this one single, and that's okay, but that's gonna be our bargaining position on our economics, is to present our economics within a package. Yep,
We would like some time to talk about
totally, gotcha.
that. 15, 10, okay. We can go back in here and. So 10 to-
10? Okay.
Article 13. I'm gonna spend a little time looking at it and bring it back.
That's good.
Okay, and then as far as the proposal to package articles together, that is not something that we would be agreeable to doing. For us, it is particularly important to settle Article 6 before we move on to any economics. As you sort of saw last time when we went through it, some of the proposals that were in there have such serious economic impacts on there that it could affect the viability of the program. So we couldn't really discuss what we're capable of doing in terms of an economics package for salary on there without knowing whether we would have something that would be so detrimental to a program, we would have to reserve everything just to run that. Where I understand with the packaged articles on there that any changes that would be done in a packaged article on there would not technically be considered regressive bargaining. The public perception of it would be. And it's not a position that we really want to put ourselves into. So we would not be agreeable to that. It is our understanding as well. I hear that you would like to present your articles as packaged. But it is our understanding that the agreement to package articles is something that would have to be agreed upon in collective bargaining itself. That it is not an item that could be unilaterally submitted. Now, we need to go back and speak with our legal counsel just to make sure that we're getting the particulars of that correct. So we can do it, but we do want to establish very firmly that we would be against packaging the articles. We'd like to proceed with reconciling 6 and get that TA'd so that we can move on to the economics proposals.
Is it your position that you will not submit to us a wage or health insurance proposal until Article 6 is TA'd?
We would have to at least get to an agreement on major portions of it that we have agreed have been struck out of the article on there. There are certainly some things that we could get down to on there, but anything that you've already put into it on there that has a serious economic impact, those would have to be resolved before we can move on. There are several things in Article 6 that don't have economic impacts, and we wouldn't have to get through those. But anything that does have the impact, we would.
So as you know, packaging allows you to continue to propose exactly what you proposed in Article 6 while offering your counters for wages and health
I'm
insurance.
aware, but we're not going to
Okay.
packaging.
I just wanted to clarify that. To make a counter contingent on us agreeing to your language in another article is problematic, I would say. We also, in good faith, cannot counter on an economic package when we don't know the full scope of what you're offering economically. So
Agreed, but Article 6 isn't an economic package. Article 6 is working conditions, right? There shouldn't be economics inside of it on there.
so you don't, so it's your position that the mileage part of it has no economic.
No, we already
We've
said
already
mileage
said-
goes to 16.
That 16.
When do you anticipate you're going to be able to present a wage and health insurance proposal for our team's consideration?
When we can get through the major economic items that were submitted in Article 6. So if you're willing, we submitted a counter on Article 6. And if we can get to a point to Article 6 where what we see inside of it on there, we say no longer has material economic impact on there, we're ready to submit a proposal for 16.
I apologize. I just, help me understand, because I thought you were just saying that you didn't believe it, Article 6 to be an economic article.
It's not an economic article, but the language that was submitted in Article 6 has serious economic impacts. It's not intended to be one, but once you start putting labor requirements on there, it absolutely becomes one. As it's currently written, contract as stands, it's not an economic article.
I don't know that we are of the same mind on that. We have an interest to be able to move forward. I think we've done what we can to help us move forward and to very much hear your feedback about Article 6, but it feels a little bit like a couple of articles are being held hostage unless we move or make agreement on another article. And I think it's fair to ask that we see what your position is on wages and health insurance at this stage in bargaining.
Well, without knowing, what it is really expectation wise as to what would be included in terms of mandates for certain labor ratios, mandates for payments on caseloads that we don't even have defined. We've been very open with you. We've shown you what we have to deal with budgetarily on there. You can see there isn't a whole lot of room for us to do it. And without knowing whether or not you are valuing those staffing considerations more than the economic considerations on there, I can't tell you where we can put the dollars, right? Right now, we would have to reserve absolutely every dollar that we need in order to satisfy the stuff that you have in Article 6. I couldn't put a number on the table for you.
Can I ask what stops you from, say you give us a wage counter and a health insurance counter? Right, and this is not TA Article 6. What prevents you from, say we then reach an agreement on wages and healthcare? What prevents you from maintaining your position on Article 6 and not agreeing to it?
What prevents us from maintaining our position on Article 6 and not agreeing to it?
Yeah,
Well, nothing really does, but we're definitely aware of how this has been done in other districts on there, and it's ended very poorly, and it's not a path that we're going to go down.
can you expand on that?
Yes, with Albany, this went very poorly to do it in this direction, to get an agreement on the economics on there before settling items in working conditions. And it ended very poorly. We don't think that that's a good path forward for us. We also don't think that it's necessary for the ESD.
So economic items like wages and health insurance from your position were TA'd on prior to working conditions in Albany?
They were agreed upon. They were publicly disclosed as to what was available and what people were willing to do. And it created problems later on because anything that moved looked like regressive bargaining. We don't think it's a good way to do it.
And it's your position that a package proposal does not assist in that.
It's our position that we're not willing to do a package proposal.
Appreciate your candidness.
Mhm.
Any other questions?
We just want to kind of make our
Summarize
plan or
counters.
summarize where we're at counters wise. I think we could do that. So we have
one.
Article 1 still. Are we holding on to any others? At the moment?
6,
And well, so we offered our package,
right?
I suppose, so that's. And then you already talked about Christina 10 and 12,
They'll be coming,
and then we have the
and
package,
15 will also be coming.
okay. Okay,
And
and I know you said,
I'm gonna look at 8 just a little bit more. and then
Yes.
Bring it back. Or sorry, 13.
13, right?
Thirteen.
Okay.
Yeah,
now it's in there,
Oh, and then we have.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
7.
yes.
and we had a quick question too. For clarity, so on articles.
Top line.
Perfect, okay, yes. For the employees, will be allowed to cash out up to 2 out of 3 personal leave days. if I heard this correctly, you were saying that that was equivalent to 2 FTEs. Could you expand more on that? I think we didn't fully understand.
Sure, you've got about 160 members, and if each member cashes out 2 days, it's 320 days cashed out off of a 190 contract. It's roughly the equivalent of 2 FTE.
Positions,
Yes, the cost.
the cost of.
The cost of 2
positions.
positions, yes.
Of cutting them or adding them?
Whichever way you're going to look at it, it would add 2 FTE of cost to our equation on there, which would likely cause us to cut 2 FTE.
Thank you.
I think that was the question we had.
I think so.
Okay. And then going into the coast, so we talked about that at the beginning, Rocco and Tim will be there, everyone else who can be there virtual. Pearl and I will reach out about tech. And you said no board members present, that's okay, we can discuss or share counters and caucus. And we appreciate people's flexibility on that, that means a lot to the coast members. And you asked for an agenda by next Friday.
If that would be helpful.
Okay, so we'll get you one by next Friday. Was there anything else that we had talked about? Good. So we're off next week and then we'll be back at the coast.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.